Hello, this is Antandra, and today I'm going to tell you about my top 5 reasons to convert MIDI into audio. So, I've seen this question floating around online, why would you convert MIDI into audio? It's a valid question. I mean, there's a lot you can do when it's in MIDI, and you can continue to edit the sound, and so why would you convert it to audio? Well, here are my top 5 reasons. Number 1, sound design. There's a lot of things you can do with audio that you can't do in MIDI, including, bouncing audio from one plugin to another. So, for example, let's listen to this intro part right here. So I have this part here made with Serum, and if I just go ahead and bounce this to audio, I'm going to freeze it and then flatten. That's what they call it in Ableton. Some programs call it bounce in place. So once it's frozen, it's basically audio. I can either right-click again and say flatten, or I can create a new audio track and hold Option and drag it down. You can see the audio there. Can do the same thing over here and over here. So now I could basically delete this MIDI track. If you want to see what it looks like when I flatten it, identical. So let's go ahead and delete it. Alright, so now we have it as audio. So there's so many things we can do. First of all, I'm going to hit Command E to cut it right there. I'm just going to right click on this whole thing, and I'm going to say slice to new MIDI track. And we're going to use the transient markers, so wherever it detects a strong transient or beat. And we're going to use the built-in setting and hit OK. So now we could go ahead and mute this top bit because we have this MIDI track again. So we went from MIDI to audio and then back to MIDI. And now we could actually rearrange these slices. So let's hear what it sounds like. So it's basically the same right now, but I could fully, get in here and start moving stuff around, repeating different sections. I could also remove this completely and just play something in on the keyboard. Just have to find the right octave that has the notes. Or just sounds in this case. And then you could just play something in rhythmically. Then you can go in and edit that. So I could quantize it, Command U, and take out accidental notes like these. Let's see what we got. I could go ahead and throw like an OTT compressor on there to bring up the levels and just make it stand out. So let's turn that way down. So again, we could just flatten this to audio. And now we can see what we're working with, some really squished sounds. Some other types of sound design we could do would be like samplers or granular synthesizers. So let's go ahead and throw Ableton Simpler just for a simple example. And we could drag it in there. Now we have slice mode, so we could again play with the slices. I could delete this one, and let's just let's go ahead and play in a part. You could also use like an arpeggiator or whatever you want. So let's try that actually. Probably get some cooler rhythms. So if I practice something, I could figure it out, but you can also just hold a key and get some cool stuff with this approach. Try different tempos and different amounts of steps and distances of notes in between. That's kind of cool. So then I could let's just add that note in, make it go all the way across. Really strange. We could also change this to gate. Adjust the sensitivity to get different slices. Could play with the fades. Change the pitch completely. So now it's nothing like the original. Could throw like a filter, a frequency shifter, whatever you want really, like a compressor. As if it wasn't compressed enough, right? And once again, we could freeze and flatten. Now we have it in audio again. Looks like this. It's just an endless rabbit hole, guys. Lots of sound design possibilities. I could quantize all of these, and then I could play with different grooves here. So I could do like a Logic 8 swing. Or I could do 16th. Or any number of them. I could open the groove pool. Let's try some MPC 8 swings. now if I hit commit, you can see it's adjusted the audio. We could also load this into a granulizer. So let's go ahead and create a new MIDI track. We'll go to the max for live devices, granulator 2, and we can drag it in there. And there it is. And now if I mute this, we can play with the granulator 2. Here I have this pattern. And it repeats. So what I could do is go in here, select all this MIDI, and actually reverse the MIDI, and then I can bounce this down to audio or just record it in a new track. In this case, I'm just gonna record it. So let's go to this audio track and say input from track 13, record, and let's go ahead and add some reverb to this. So let's give it a big tail, and now I'm gonna record this in. Hold on. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to record this in. Keep in mind this is reversed. Okay, perfect. So now I can chop that off. I can actually reverse the audio now, move this over, and I get this nice reversed reverb effect. So let's switch this from in back to auto, and let's hear what this sounds like. I could also try moving the position around to different places and see what that does to the sound. So yeah, that's one way you can do sound design. You can also, I mean, there's any number of things you can do with audio in the sound design world. You could load it into a sampler, a granulizer, you can stretch it out, run texture on it. So let's try that out. We can just extend this now, stretch it out, and then we can try like a texturizer and play with the grain size here. And normally you can't automate this grain size. Well, actually, no, you can right here, but you used to not be able to. And that was another nice reason to record to audio, so you could just resample what it's doing here, but so now if I freeze and flatten this, freeze track, freezing essentially turns it into audio. We'll get into that in a little bit. So if I flatten it, now you can see it's got the granulized effect applied. Can try different warp modes here again. There's also beats. You can get some cool rhythmic stuff going on. Just play with this length right here, and you can adjust the speed here and the type of movement. So you can have it just play once, or you can have it play forward and loop, or you could have it play forward and backwards. So let's try forward and backward. Let's try forward and shorten the length. So you definitely can't automate that. So that would be another thing where if you wanted to play with the length live or something, you could record it in. Alright, so there's sound design. We can also load this into like a granulizer. So if I just create a new track here, and we'll open up like a Max for Live granulizer. That's the input. Granulizer instruments. Here we go. Granulizer 2. Let's go ahead and load this into it. And then we can work in this to create some other weird sound effects. So yeah, all that just from the one sound, turning it into audio, and you get all these other possibilities. So let's see, I'll go ahead and record that. ties it to the beat, and hear what that sounds like. Yeah, I like it. So yeah, sound design is number one. Number two is being able to save sounds. So sometimes you might have like a external hardware synth, and in order to get the preset back, you'd have to put all the settings back exactly as they are because there's no save button. Or you might have like an iPad and you have a preset in there, and you just don't want to have your iPad connected to your computer every time you're playing the song. Those might be good times to record it to audio so that you don't, require the preset or the actual synth or whatever it is. Or if you have a very random sound like this granulator 2, this is a perfect example of just total randomness. So every time I press a note, I'm going to get different results. Maybe I want it to sound the same every time, so then I could render it to audio. Also, there's this sound that I recorded in Reason. I was using the external instrument before, and it would have required that Reason be running in the background. I had the grain synth, and I drew in some automation there. So I'd have to save this patch with the other song and open both at once every time I wanted to listen to the song. Well, now that it's audio, I don't have to worry about it. I could just close Reason. I don't even need to save the patch if I don't want to. And here it is in audio. And I could also click on the audio, drag it over into my user library for later use. Say I want to use the melody in a song or something, just drag it over here to my melodies, and there you go. Up here I have this operator, and it's playing white noise with some reverb, and it's going through this auto pan, so it sounds like this. And then if I play it again, it's going to sound a little different but very similar. Same thing if I play it again. A little bit of randomness to it, so you can really hear it with the beat too, so let's hear it in context. So it's got some randomness to it because it's not synced to the beat, it's using hertz. And so if I want to have it sound the same every time I listen to the song, then I would want to flatten it to audio. So let's just go ahead and do that. And now, see, there it is, this version of it. I'm going to go ahead and copy that, and let's go ahead and undo. I'm going to go to a new track here and paste that one. And now let's unfreeze it. See, freezing basically turns it into audio, so let's just freeze that. And now I could, instead of flattening, you can also just create a track, and I could hold Option on the Mac and drag it down, and then we have that. So you can see it's totally different than the other one, even though it's the same preset. It has that randomness just built into it. So we could then audition these and see which one we'd like to use. Or so I like the top one, I think, so I'm going to get rid of this one. Yeah, number 3 is editing. So let's get into that. I can go in here and adjust the timing of this. So it's still kind of offbeat, but a little more on beat, you know? I could try different variations. Let's try another warp mode, like texture again. See, then I could also go in here and hit R to reverse that section. All kinds of editing you can do once it's in audio that you can't do in Midi. I could, gate it. I could create like a stuttered gate by chopping out certain bits. I probably wouldn't do that with this sound, but just an example. We can also crossfade these, so you can have like different sounds kind of crossfading between each other. Move some of these onto the beat so that they seem like they're kind of going to the rhythm, even though it's kind of a logarithmic pattern. Fade the edges so I could have it gradually come in, like. I could also pitch this down. So I just held shift and went down an octave, which is nice, especially with this texture algorithm. And you can see that some of these bass notes, when they stop, when the pattern stops, the note has this, sustained release that continues on into the next section. Well, maybe I don't want that muddying up my next section, so what I could do is just mute it, and now it just chops directly into it, whereas before it was, maybe rumbling in the background, you could barely notice it, but these things kind of add up to dirty up your mix. So I could do the same thing for the tail of this. I could just mute that. You can also do some cool reverse reverb stuff. So I could take the tail of this, shorten it down, and then reverse it so it leads into this section. Subtle, but it adds a nice effect. You could clean up the end of your song, so maybe you don't want the reverb to go on as long. You could just kind of bring this in and fade it out sooner. I could again clean up the section here where it transitions. Like maybe I don't want that ringing on, maybe I do, but I have that choice. I can mute it, see what it sounds like. If I can't notice it, then I may as well leave it muted. That way it's just cleaner going into the next part. Let's try it. See, in that case, I do want it to ring out, so I'm going to unmute that by hitting 0 on the keyboard. Maybe I want to add like another note in there, so I can copy this, reverse it. I could change the pitch of it here. Find the tone that I want. And then I could even crossfade these. So let me get this in place here, and then I can kind of crossfade these by moving this around. Once you have randomness recorded, or you've captured a preset or some sounds, then you have a lot of editing to do to just take out the bits that you like best, or you have that option anyway. So let's listen through this. So maybe I don't like this section, I can just take it out, or non-destructively I could press 0 to mute it. Press Command E to chop that section. I could take this section, chop it there, maybe fade it in. I could reverse this bit, fade it out, you know, maybe chop it here, give a little bit of a repeating pattern. So this is great for glitch and stuff. Then I could press Command J and consolidate, whatever it be, like IDM, crossfade. So much you can do editing audio that you can't really do in Midi. Reverse this section. So let's see what this sounds like now. Yeah, it's kind of neat. So then I could, you know, do some similar stuff here. Rather than a crossfade, I just want it to fade in. Yeah, stuff like that. Then I could go ahead and consolidate that to audio. Command J, and then we have that. I could reverse it. And now we have a cool intro. Reverbs, delays, lots of unison voices, those kinds of things really add up on your CPU, which we're going to get to in a bit. But first I want to cover my fourth point, which is collaboration. You know, sometimes I like to bounce my tracks down and send them to a friend. Maybe they don't have the same DAW, or they don't have all the same plugins. So converting to audio, even if you just leave the tracks frozen, then they can open them up if they don't have the plugins, because it's basically audio. If they do have them, they can unfreeze them and use them. But if they don't, it's in audio form, so they can still work on the project and hear it as it was meant to be. So freezing your stuff is really good for collaboration. But if you want to export it all and bring it into another DAW, like sometimes I like to bring it into Logic and do some mixing or play with some of the tools in there, you can go into export all individual tracks and I would recommend doing a high quality wave in 24-bit at least, and you don't have to do an MP3 unless you want, but I would not dither. I would save dithering until the final master, because that adds some noise in the background, and you don't want it to layer on there. I mean, unless you do, but I recommend leaving dither off, and then you can bounce all individual tracks and bring them into your program of choice. So my fifth and final bullet point, which is last but not least, is CPU reduction. So you'll notice if I play this song, watch the CPU meter up here in the top right. It's going to be hovering pretty high. I'm guessing around 60%, maybe 70% when it gets going in the main section here. So let's just keep an eye on that, and I'll show you the next section here. You can see that it gets pretty high there with the CPU spikes up into the 70%. So if I go ahead and select all these tracks and just freeze them, it's going to take a minute, but once that's done, we can recheck the CPU. Like I said, freezing is enough for collaboration if somebody has Ableton Live, but if they're using a different DAW, then you're going to want to just export it all to individual audio files, and then they can import those into their workstation of choice and continue editing. Now that all the tracks have been frozen, I can go ahead and select them all, right-click and say Flatten. Let's go ahead and just play it now, and you can see how much less CPU intensive it is. So I'm going to collapse all this down, and let's just hear it. Look at that, 23%. So yeah, you can see it's about a third of what it was, if not less. I guess that pretty well covers it. So if you have any reasons that you like to convert MIDI into audio that I haven't covered, please feel free to share them in the comments. And until next time, Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe if you did. Until next time, I'm Entendre.